I still remember the day Emma was born. I was only 5 years old, and I, not yet realizing the full significance of this event, looked at my mother with curiosity when she informed me with a soft smile that a new family member, my younger sister, would be arriving in our house very soon. Dad supported her words by putting his arm around my shoulders and saying that now I would have not just a sister, but a best friend for life, a person with whom I could share the joys, secrets, and childhood adventures. As a child, I fully believed these words, expecting that Emma and I would have a strong, unbreakable bond, but no one warned me that with this I would become invisible in my own family. My name is Paula, and if being part of the Mitchell family meant one thing, it was the need to understand early on that there was an unshakable hierarchy in which everyone's position was distributed in advance and not subject to revision. From my earliest childhood, it was clear to me that Emma was at the top of the family pyramid, and I was somewhere at the bottom, even below our elderly dog named Benny, who enjoyed immeasurably more love and attention than me. It wasn't something hidden or unobvious. On the contrary, prioritization was evident in everything, from the most ordinary everyday situations to important events in our lives. Every morning, Emma's mother carefully prepared breakfast: 2 fried eggs, neatly arranged on a plate next to slices of toast, cut diagonally, as my princess likes, as she often repeated with affection. I got a box of cereal thrown on the table with a fleeting phrase, "You can pour yourself some milk." The differences between us showed up even in such small things, but over time there became too many of them to ignore. When I needed braces, my father sighed with displeasure and grumbled about how expensive it would be, discussing with my mother for several months whether it was possible to find a cheaper alternative. However, 2 years later, when Emma needed the same braces, the question of money suddenly ceased to exist. Moreover, she was bought expensive, transparent, almost invisible models, which I once begged for, but they refused me. I always felt like I existed somewhere on the periphery of their attention. When I got my first prosthetics, they gave me scattered nods, as if it didn't really matter. However, when Emma received praise for her participation in the school play, where she got only 2 lines, her parents arranged a festive dinner for her at her favorite restaurant, where her mother admiringly told how wonderful her youngest daughter looked on stage. I watched this from my seat at the table and realized that no matter how many achievements I collected, they would never mean as much to them as Emma's minor success. Birthdays were another painful topic. My holidays were modest: a cake from the supermarket, a few girlfriends gathered in the backyard, modest gifts, and a short greeting. In contrast, Emma's birthdays resembled grandiose shows: inflatable rides, hired animators, huge cakes with tiered decorations, hundreds of guests enthusiastically congratulating the little princess. I once accidentally overheard a conversation between my mother and her friend, where she said that Emma simply appreciates such things more, unlike me, than the practical Paula. But that wasn't the worst part. It was worse to see how Emma herself had changed over the years. When she was little, she was a sweet child, and we could spend hours playing together, building fortresses out of blankets, making up magical stories, and laughing ourselves to tears. But the older she got, the more she got used to the fact that she could get anything she wanted. She's learned a simple truth: if she complains to Mom or Dad, I'll instantly lose. "Paula, where's my blue sweater?" "What is it?" she demanded, rummaging through my closet without any permission. "He's mine, Emma. Mom bought it for my birthday." "I need it for Jessica's party," she pouted, knowing she'd already won the argument. "Mom," she called in a loud voice. "Paula doesn't want to share." The reaction was predictable. Mom would come into the room and, without even listening to me, raise her eyebrows and say reproachfully, "Paula, don't be selfish, let your sister borrow it." That's how I learned to choose my battles: not to expect anything, not to hope for recognition, and to seek solace somewhere outside the home. School became my refuge, a place where I could express myself without fear that someone would devalue my achievements. I won academic competitions, passed exams with honors, took additional challenging courses, and developed university admission strategies, hoping that one day, When I left this house, they would finally see me and understand who I am. One day, when I received a letter about enrolling in a state university on a full scholarship, I felt a surge of pride inside me. I thought maybe now they would pay attention to me, praise me, support me. I went into the kitchen, where at dinner Emma was once again enthusiastically talking about her student council campaign, in 7th grade, of course, but that didn't stop Mom and Dad from listening admiringly to her every word. Mom, Dad, I took a breath, trying to hide my excitement. I got a full scholarship. There was a pause for a few seconds, and I almost believed that they would smile at me, congratulate me, and tell me how proud they were of me. That's sweet, honey, Mom muttered, waving her hand away, and immediately turned her gaze back to Emma. Emma, honey, tell me again about those election posters that you made. At that moment, I realized that nothing would change. I continued to come home only for big holidays, but even then I counted the minutes until I could leave. Every visit was the same. Emma's achievements have always remained in the spotlight, while my high ranking on the dean's list, brilliant recommendations from professors, and numerous internship offers at prestigious companies didn't even seem to deserve a close look from my family. I've learned to make my visits home as short as possible, and my expectations from my parents even shorter. Every semester, as soon as the final exams were over, I felt inexpressibly relieved to return to my tiny but cozy dorm, where my achievements were solely mine, and no one tried to compare them with the mediocre achievements of my younger sister, who still continued to be their universal favorite. In my 3rd year, when I had finally gotten used to the idea that my success would never be a cause for pride in the Mitchell family, I received an unexpected message on Facebook, which, as it turned out, changed my whole life. Hey, do you remember me? This is Mike Harrison from Kennedy High. I was at graduation when you were a freshman. Of course, I remembered him, the good-looking guy from the debate team, witty, confident, the one who was always looked at with admiration. He was one of those people who seemed to live in another world, a world where popularity determined everything, and I hardly ever entered his field of vision. We started communicating daily, sharing memories of our school years, discussing college, dreams, and plans for the future. It turned out that Mike had been working as an engineer in our hometown after graduation, and there was an inexplicable but pleasant ease of communication between us, as if we had known each other all our lives. Something clicked at that moment, and I realized that I no longer saw that guy from school in front of me. Now he was just Mike, the person with whom I wanted to talk, laugh, and share my thoughts. After graduating from university, I returned home and got a job at Turner & Associates as a project manager. Mike suggested that we meet for coffee the first week after my return. That coffee flowed smoothly into dinner into the next date, and then we started looking for an apartment together. It happened so naturally that I didn't even notice the moment I stopped feeling lonely. The only dark cloud over this whole fairy tale was the constant detachment of my parents, who barely noticed my successes and changes in life, still completely immersed in caring for Emma. It's so hard for her to adjust, Mom sighed heavily during our rare phone calls. College is not as easy for everyone as it is for you. I didn't try to argue. It's been a long time since I've expected any praise, recognition, or even a simple sincere interest in my life. But at that moment, I had Mike's family to fill in the gap, filling my life with the warmth I'd been deprived of for so long. His parents, Tom and Sarah, welcomed me with open arms, as if I were their own daughter, and his younger sister, Jenny, became the sister I always dreamed of, but Emma never managed to become for me. They came to dinner with us, helped us set up the apartment, took care of my career growth, and never tired of saying how proud they were of me. "We are so happy for both of you," Sarah said at our small wedding, which took place 2 years after we met. It was a simple but incredibly cozy ceremony in Mike's parents' garden, among close friends and family. Of course, my parents came too, but I hardly spoke to them all evening, as most of the time I had to listen to my mother's endless stories about how wonderful Emma had proved herself during the summer internship. Life seemed almost perfect. I thrived at work, felt happy in my marriage, and finally found a family that truly valued me and my life. And when, a couple of years after the wedding, I found out that I was pregnant, it seemed to me that my happiness had reached its limit. Our son, Lucas, was born healthy, strong, with a fluffy dark crest on his head, and I will never forget the look on Mike's face when he first picked him up. He was a caring father, an attentive husband, and I was sure that our family was what I had always dreamed of. But something changed when Lucas turned 1 year old. Mike began to stay late at work more and more often, skipping our scheduled dinners, canceling dates that we sometimes arranged in order to feel like not only parents, but also a couple for a while. I convinced myself that it was temporary, that it was all about fatigue, new responsibilities, and work-related stresses. But the more I tried to ignore the alarms, the more I realized that something more was going on. The answer came on one of the usual Tuesdays. I was feeding Lucas, who was sitting in his high chair, scattering pieces of bread on the table, when Mike came into the house. He looked broken, tired, but there was something else in his eyes, something that made my stomach turn cold. "I need to tell you something," he began, and his voice was shaking. I put down my spoon, looking at him expectantly, already knowing that what I was most afraid of was about to sound. "I met another woman." There was silence in the room, broken only by the rustle of Lucas's booties on the legs of the chair. "Her name is Rachel," Mike continued, and I noticed how he clenched his fists, as if gathering strength. "She's a client at work. And I fell in love with her." Then everything happened quickly, as if someone had pressed the fast-forward button in a movie. The divorce was swift and surprisingly civilized. Mike, despite the complexity of the situation, insisted on paying generous alimony and child support. I could be a terrible husband, he told me the day we last met, when things were already packed and he was standing at the door with a suitcase in his hands, ready to leave for Colorado with Rachel. But I won't be a terrible father. I was sitting in my lawyer's office after signing the last documents, feeling a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. The room was quiet, only the wall clock ticked off the seconds softly, and I looked at these papers in front of me, realizing that everything was official now. My marriage to Mike was in the past, like a long-closed chapter in a book, and a new life awaited me, in which I had to cope with everything myself. I held Lucas close, inhaling his warm, childlike scent, his tiny fingers gripping my sleeve tightly, and even though he was only 2 years old, I knew he was feeling the changes. He was too young to understand why Dad no longer came home in the evenings, why there were no more family dinners in his world, his parents laughing at the same table, and it hurt me to realize that, despite all my efforts, he, too, would grow up feeling lost. Mike's family was the only lifeline for us. Despite everything that happened to their son, Tom and Sarah remained Lucas' devoted grandparents, and Jenny turned into the aunt any child could dream of. As soon as we crossed the threshold of their house, Lucas's face lit up with joy. He immediately broke out of my arms and rushed to the corner that they had specially equipped for him: bright toys, a soft rug, a stack of children's books with colorful pictures. All this was prepared with such love that my heart sank with gratitude. Tom would lie down on the floor to play with the cars, making funny engine sounds, and Jenny would always come up with something new, either a pirate game or another handmade project that Lucas loved making with his little hands. My own parental home was a completely different story. I tried to visit my parents, hoping that they would want to build a relationship with their only grandson, but these visits only brought me disappointment and pain. They expressed no interest, no joy, no desire to be a part of his life. "Paula, don't let him touch that vase," Mom snapped, barely looking up from a glossy magazine, and immediately frowned at Lucas if he laughed too loudly or ran around the room. "He'll scratch the parquet floor." I felt my son clinging to me more and more, clinging to my leg, catching the cold atmosphere around him. But the worst part was watching how the contrast in their attitudes became even more pronounced, and Emma appeared during our visits. "Here's my successful girl." Dad beamed when she entered the living room, all in new expensive clothes, with another story about how she was offered a job at a prestigious trading company. Lucas, naively trying to attract attention, ran towards them with a drawing he had recently drawn, but they didn't even look in his direction. The parents were too busy hanging on Emma's every word about office politics, clients, and career opportunities to pay attention to their grandson for even a second. After such meetings, I felt drained, and over time, these visits became less frequent. Instead of trying to get things from my parents that they never had for me, I decided to focus on what I could control: my career, creating a stable, loving home for Lucas, and people who truly appreciated us. Tom, Sarah, and Jenny were happy to help me with my son, and I knew that I could count on them at any time, so I could afford to focus on my work and take on more complex projects. The Singapore contract is risky, my boss warned when I volunteered to lead it. No one has been able to close this deal for 3 years. I can do it, I replied confidently. 3 months of continuous negotiations, late-night video calls, coordination with different time zones, and careful consideration of proposals have yielded results. I not only closed the deal, but also doubled its amount. This success was followed by new projects, even more complex, even more ambitious, and with each new achievement, I strengthened my reputation as someone who was trusted by the company's most important customers. My promotion to Senior Director of Customer Service earned me a corner office with panoramic windows and a salary that really made my eyes water. Paula Mitchell. There was a joyful toast at the corporate party after I successfully closed the largest deal with Microsoft. The miracle worker of our company. The bonus I received for this deal was so impressive that I finally decided to do what I had been dreaming about for a long time: buy your own house. That same weekend, I took Lucas and went looking for him. "This area is great," said the realtor, showing us a spacious house with 3 bedrooms and a cozy living room. "The park is just a stone's throw away, and the school district is considered one of the best." Lucas enthusiastically ran from room to room, looking into cupboards, climbing on window sills, and loudly discussing where he would put his toys. I looked at him and smiled, realizing that I was making the right choice. I took one last look at the phone screen, where the mortgage calculations remained in the calculator, took a deep breath, and confidently said, "We're taking him." That evening, when I put Lucas to bed in our old apartment, it seemed to me that we were finally on the threshold of a new life, in which everything would be exactly as I had always dreamed. One of the last nights in our old apartment, when I was putting Lucas to bed, he asked me if we were really going to have a new house where he would have his own room. His eyes were shining with anticipation, and there was admiration in his voice, which I had so rarely heard addressed to me as a child. "Your own room," I repeated, stroking his soft blonde hair. "A corner for creativity, a place for all your books, and even a wall on which you can hang your drawings." Lucas hugged me tightly, burying his face in my shoulder. "You're the best mom in the world," he muttered, already falling asleep. I looked at him, feeling like somewhere deep inside me there was an awareness of something important. Although I couldn't change my past or influence what kind of parents Mom and Dad were to me, I could break this vicious circle. My son will never doubt his worth, will never feel good enough, will never fight for the attention and love that should be given to a child for nothing. After the news about my promotion and the purchase of an apartment became known, everything suddenly began to change at an amazing rate. One morning, when I was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, my phone vibrated. The message was from Mom. "Honey, we haven't seen you and Lucas in years. Why don't you come this weekend?" I stared at the screen, almost dropping the mug from my hands. She was the same woman who had spent the last 5 years barely aware of my existence, the same mother who had shown no interest in either my life or her grandson's. I closed my eyes and remembered Lucas, who sometimes asked about my grandparents, why they didn't come to visit, and why he didn't have the same fond memories of them as his friends had of theirs. Maybe people can really change. The following weekend, I took Lucas to their house. The difference was amazing. "Here is my beloved grandson," Dad exclaimed enthusiastically as soon as we entered. Considering that Lucas was their only grandson, it didn't say much, but still. "Look what Grandma gave you." Mom pulled out a new toy car from under the table, which they proudly handed to Lucas. I froze in place. It was something she had never done before. "And I baked cookies," she added with unnatural enthusiasm. "You like chocolate chips, don't you?" Lucas, being too young to remember their previous indifference, was delighted. I watched in silence as my mother got down on the floor to play with him, something I had never seen in my childhood. "Paula, honey," Mom said later, when Lucas was enthralled by his new truck. "We would like to see him more often. Maybe some weekend? Don't you need to rest sometimes?" It was so surreal that I didn't know how to react. But I decided to go with the flow. What did they say about the gift horse? In the months that followed, my parents became unexpectedly involved grandparents. They increasingly asked Lucas to stay with them for the weekend, and I used this time to meet with Jenny. "You look happier," she remarked one day during our shopping trips. "More relaxed." It's nice to see that they're finally making an effort. I shrugged, acknowledging the obvious. "Even if I know why," I added, and Jenny nodded understandingly. The picture became even clearer when the requests started coming in one after another. First there were the little things. "Paula, Bill needs help with plumbing, and your dad can't figure out the clock. It needs to be repaired," Mom said casually, as if it were something self-evident. Of course, I helped. After all, they were my parents. I thought back to all those years when they paid for expensive clubs and summer camps for Emma, while I had to settle for rejections. In a way, it was nice to know that they were depending on me now. Then I heard the news about Emma from them. "She's fine, everything's just fine," my mother assured me over a family dinner that had suddenly become a tradition. But her work at the trading company is not going as planned. It turned out that she had been promoted several times. It's just office politics. Mom threw up her hands. They just don't recognize talent there. I didn't answer. And then the requests got bigger. The refrigerator started messing up, Mom complained one day. And the renovation of the house would not hurt, added the father. I rolled my eyes, but didn't say anything. And then that conversation came. We were thinking of buying a new car, his father said that Sunday, as Lucas dozed upstairs. But payments on it will be a bit steep for us. I already knew where everything was going. With your new position. He continued cautiously. How much? I asked, crossing my arms over my chest. They named the number. A year ago, I would have choked. Now this amount was quite manageable for me. We'll give you your money back, Mom hastily assured me. But we both knew that wasn't going to happen. I agreed anyway. Maybe it was a kind of confirmation that I was finally able to win their recognition, or maybe I just wanted to prove something to myself to prove that I didn't care, that money didn't matter to me, that I didn't need their approval to feel good. Full-fledged. Anyway, I started sending them a check every month, covering the payment for the car they wanted so badly, and I did it without a single reminder, without waiting for gratitude, just ticking off my mental list of obligations. Just be careful, Jenny said the next day, as we sat in a cafe drinking cappuccino. Money tends to complicate things. I nodded, but inside I was thinking, how difficult can it be? I had enough of them, more than enough, and if buying my parents' attention meant that Lucas wouldn't have to grow up without grandparents, wasn't it worth it? It all started like an ordinary Tuesday. I was making a presentation for a client, confidently talking about the promotion strategy, when I felt a sharp, stabbing pain in my lower abdomen. It struck suddenly, like lightning, forcing me to bend over in my chair and grip the edge of the table with my fingers, trying to catch my breath. Call an ambulance, I heard someone's voice through the buzzing in my ears. She's as white as a sheet. After that, everything turned into a blur of movements and voices, flashing faces, flashes of light, the smell of disinfectants, someone's hands gently laying me on a stretcher. I heard fragments of phrases that almost did not reach my consciousness. Classic symptoms of appendicitis. The doctor's voice sounded from somewhere far away. We need to take her to the memorial immediately. Through the fog of pain, a single thought pierced my mind with crystal clarity: Lucas. He needs to be picked up from school in 2 hours. When we got to the hospital, the diagnosis was confirmed quickly and definitively. Your appendix needs to be removed, the doctor informed me in an even, professional tone. We have already prepared the operating room. You will have to stay here for at least 2 days. I need to make a phone call, I managed to say, feeling a wave of panic wash over me. Of course, the nurse nodded and handed me the phone. My fingers were shaking as I dialed my mom's number. She answered on the 4th ring, and her voice was even, calm, as if I'd just called to chat about the weather. I clenched my teeth, trying to speak clearly. I'm in the hospital. It's the appendix, they said it needs urgent surgery. Could you pick up Lucas from school? I'm going to need someone to look after him for a couple of days until I get better. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Oh, darling, my mother finally said, but there was no concern or sympathy in her voice. That's impossible. Your dad and I are getting ready for Emma's promotion party. She finally became a junior executive in her company. I blinked, feeling an icy wave wash over my head. Mom, please. I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady so as not to scream. I need help. Lucas needs to be picked up in less than 2 hours. Well, that's really not our problem, she replied matter-of-factly, as if she were talking about something completely insignificant. We're rushing to the restaurant, there are 50 people waiting for us, and we can't leave everything. I gripped the phone so tightly that my fingers turned white. Can't babysit. I was almost choking on a mixture of pain and rage. He's your grandson. On the other end of the line, Mom sighed heavily, as if I was an unreasonable child who didn't understand the obvious things. Paula, listen, her voice sounded patient now, but with a hint of annoyance. Lucas is your responsibility. He's always so noisy, touching everything. It's a really heavy load. I froze. A heavy load? After all I've done for them? After paying off their car loan for a year, how did I give them money every time they asked? How did I try to bring them back into our lives, give them a chance to be part of the family? I've been paying you for the car for the past year. My voice was shaking, but it wasn't from weakness anymore. Every time you needed money. Mom laughed. Not warmly, not shyly, but briefly, abruptly, with a note of mockery that made me go cold. Oh, Paula, she said with an ease that made my throat constrict. We don't need your handouts anymore. Emma has a great salary now. She will help us instead of you. Before I could say a word, the connection was cut off. I was left lying in a hospital bed, with my phone pressed to my ear, hot tears mixing with sweat on my forehead, and an emptiness inside that was growing by the second. All these months when I helped them, all this money that I sent without a single question, all these weekends when I pretended that we had a warm family relationship, when I tried to convince myself that maybe we really had a chance to become closer, it was all in vain. At that moment, when someone better appeared, someone more convenient, someone whose attention and help were now more important to them, Lucas and I again turned out to be not only unnecessary, but also frankly inconvenient. My thoughts were racing through my head, but then I felt a light touch on my arm. The nurse was standing next to me. Her voice was soft but insistent. Miss Mitchell, we really need to prepare you for surgery, right now. I nodded, unable to collect my thoughts, already dialing Jenny's number, the only person I could call for help. She answered immediately after the first ring. Jenny. My voice broke as I tried to hold back the tears, but she immediately intervened, her tone firm and confident. What happened? I'm in the hospital with appendicitis. They're preparing me for surgery. I squeezed the phone in my fingers. Could you pick up Lucas from school? I hate to impose, but... Text me the address of the school, she said immediately. What time should I pick him up? At 2:30. Jenny, I'm so sorry that I'm asking. Stop it, she snapped. Lucas is my nephew. I'll get it, don't worry. Let him stay at my place for the night, he likes to play with Max anyway. I could hear her grabbing her keys as she was about to leave. Thank you, I whispered, feeling tears running down my cheeks. Focus on recovery, Jenny said firmly. Lucas will be fine with me, I promise. The next thing I remember is waking up in the intensive care unit. His mind was clouded by anesthesia, and his body felt heavy, but his first coherent thought was of Lucas. However, before I could get scared, the phone on the bedside table vibrated, and I saw a message from Jenny. We're having a great time. Lucas liked the pizza, and we built a huge fort out of blankets. Don't worry, just rest. Over the next 2 days, she sent photos of Lucas playing with Max in the yard, Lucas helping her bake cookies, Lucas curled up on her couch, surrounded by soft toys, and falling asleep. Each of these pictures made my heart contract with gratitude. When I was finally discharged, Jenny took me to her house. As soon as I crossed the threshold, Lucas rushed towards me, but stopped, as if remembering that I still hadn't fully recovered. Mommy, he said carefully, looking at me with wide eyes. Aunt Jenny let me help make breakfast, and Max slept in my blanket fortress. He spoke with such delight that I couldn't help but smile, even though I still felt heavy inside. Jenny helped us get home, filled the fridge with groceries, and promised to stop by every day to make sure I had everything I needed. The next 2 weeks passed in a haze of recovery. Jenny brought food, entertained Lucas, studied with him while I rested, and in the evening I sat in bed with a cup of tea, watching my son leaf through his favorite books. On one of those evenings, when I opened social media to kill time, my breathing stopped. I saw them. Dozens of photos taken on the very day I was lying in a hospital bed. Emma's promotion party. Mom and Dad beamed with pride, standing next to her. Their smiles were dazzling. They held glasses of champagne in their hands, and Emma posed in a designer dress in front of an expensive restaurant filled with guests. Toasts, laughter, a birthday cake with the inscription, "Congratulations, Emma." All this happened at the very time when I was dialing my mother's number, begging for help, and she coolly told me that I, with my child, was a burden that interfered with her evening. I looked at these pictures, feeling something break inside me, but not with painful fragility, but with a liberating feeling. When Lucas fell asleep, I sat down at the computer. The first thing I did was log into my bank account and cancel the automatic transfer that I used to pay for my parents' car every month. Then I opened my friends list on social media and deleted them from all contacts. I looked at the framed photo on my desk, Lucas and I in the park, both laughing, and Max running around us, catching soap bubbles. And then I understood. All my life, I've been trying to buy my parents' love with money, patience, humility, the expectation that if I do everything right, if I become successful enough, comfortable enough, generous enough, they will finally see me, finally accept me. But the real family is not the ones you pay for attention. A real family is the ones who pick you up from the hospital when you can't get out of bed. A real family is those who build forts out of blankets with your child, who bake cookies with him, who kiss him before going to bed and say, "They love you," just because it's true. A real family is the ones who show up when you need them the most. 3 months have passed, and life has finally settled into a measured, peaceful rhythm, which I missed so much before. Jenny, Tom, and Sarah became more than just a part of our lives. They filled the void that had been following me since childhood, and now my weekends were always surrounded by people who truly cared about me and Lucas. We had barbecues in the yard, grilled marshmallows over a campfire, went for long walks in the park, wrapped ourselves in blankets during home film screenings, and every night, when I put Lucas to bed, I felt indescribably grateful that he had a childhood filled with love and warmth that I myself had never experienced. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, when the house smelled of freshly baked pie, and from the window came the ringing laughter of Lucas, who was tinkling with Jenny and Max in the garden, my phone suddenly rang. Mom's number popped up on the screen, and I stared at it, not knowing what to do. My hand hovered over the reject button, but something inside made me respond. "Paula, honey." Mom's voice was sickly sweet, too kind, too strained. I recognized that tone right away. She always spoke like that when she needed something. "How are you doing, dear?" I closed my eyes, taking a slow breath. "What do you want, Mom?" She made a theatrical sigh, as if she expected me to offer help myself, but then, realizing that this was not going to happen, she spoke a little more plaintively. "Well, since you asked. Your father and I are in a bit of financial trouble. With payments for the car." I felt laughter bubbling up inside me, bitter, dry, full of sarcasm, but somehow I held it back. "Really?" "Yes, you see," she made a spectacular pause, as if she was about to announce something really tragic. "We hoped that Emma would help us, because now she has such a wonderful position, a good salary and everything else. But when we asked her..." She suddenly broke off the sentence, as if she was ashamed to say it out loud, but then blurted out anyway, "She refused." "Refused?" I asked, pretending to be surprised, even though everything inside was shaking with sarcastic glee. Can you imagine? Mom obviously expected me to share her outrage. She said that she has her own expenses, her own plans, and she's not up to it right now. After all we've done for her. The irony was almost too great. "I see," I said, not hiding a hint of mockery in my voice. "We were hoping." Her voice sounded quieter, softer, more careful now. "That maybe you can help with the payments again. Until we come up with something else." This time, I couldn't help but laugh. It came out suddenly, sharp, dry, and full of bitterness. "Paula, this isn't funny," Mom said sternly. "We could lose the car." "You know what's really funny, Mom?" I said, feeling an icy calmness rise in me. 3 months ago, I was lying in a hospital bed, and you called my son, your grandson, a burden. You couldn't work hard to help us because you were too busy celebrating Emma's promotion. The Emma who won't give you a dime now. Paula, we were just busy that day. Do you know what these events are like?" "No, Mom," I interrupted her. "I know exactly what is. I was convenient for you while I was paying your bills. The moment you thought that Emma could replace me as your personal ATM, Lucas and I became unnecessary again. It's not fair." "What is it?" she exclaimed. "You've always preferred Emma," I said firmly. "Always. All my life, she's been the center of attention, and I've been in the background. She always treated me like a minor one. She always took my help for granted until something better came along." Mom took a deep breath, then spoke more cautiously, but I already knew where everything was going. "Paula, please." "You called me because you need money," I interrupted her. "Right?" She said nothing. "Do you remember how you hung up on me when I was in the hospital?" I continued, not letting her get in a word. "Well, guess what? The handouts are over. I'm tired. Tired of trying to buy your love. I'm tired of watching you treat my son like he's worse than Emma's designer handbags. But the car." I laughed again, briefly, sharply, without a drop of sympathy. "Let Emma buy you a new one," I said coldly. "I don't do it anymore. Goodbye, Mom." I hung up the phone and immediately blocked her number. Then, without hesitation, I did the same with my father's number. Through the open window, I could hear Lucas laughing in the yard, playing with Jenny and Mac's real laughter. True love. A real family. The calls started in waves. First from Mom's number, then from Dad's. I didn't answer. The voice messages ranged from tearful pleas to angry demands, and the text messages became increasingly desperate. Paula, please, we are your parents. That's so selfish of you. We're going to lose the car because of you. Each message only confirmed that I had made the right decision. None of them mentioned Lucas. None of them contained even a shadow of regret for what they had done to me. It was all about them. About their needs. About their car. About their convenience. I turned off my phone, took a deep breath, and smiled as I watched Lucas toss the ball, laughing, while Jenny and Max tried to catch it. I was no longer the one running after a love that never existed. I was no longer the one who proved my worth to those who never needed it. Now I had a family. Real. I've had enough. I completely blocked their numbers, deleted their contacts from my phone, set up email filters so that their messages went straight to the trash, and finally felt like I could breathe again. There was a strange, almost unexpected feeling of lightness, as if a heavy weight that I had been carrying for years was no longer hanging on my shoulders, hoping that one day it would turn into something warm and real. One Sunday afternoon, when Jenny and I were sitting on her parents' terrace, watching Lucas and Max chase each other across the green lawn, and Tom was expertly using a spatula to turn meat over on the grill, filling the air with a delicious aroma, Sarah was putting fresh bread and vegetable snacks on the table for our weekly family dinner. She suddenly asked, "Do you know who you really are?" I accepted the glass of cold lemonade she handed me, took a sip, and thought about it. I keep waiting for myself to feel guilty or sad, but mostly I just feel free. Jenny smiled, her warm hand covering mine, squeezing in a quiet, unobtrusive gesture of support. "You gave them more chances than they deserved," she said softly. "Sometimes the most useful thing you can do is to leave." "Mommy, look what Grandpa Tom taught me." Lucas ran up to me, his eyes shining with delight, and in his hands he clutched a bright yellow frisbee, clearly proud of his new skill. "Show me," I smiled. We watched together as Tom dropped the grill, wiped his hands on a towel, and with a serious but friendly look showed Lucas how to hold the disc properly so that it flew further and more accurately. Sarah, who was standing on the terrace, loudly cheered them on, laughing with joy as the frisbee glided through the air, and Max ran after him, barking excitedly. That's what a family is. Not those who come when everything is fine, not those who appear only when they need something, but those who are there for joy and in difficult moments, who come to the hospital, who pick up a child from school when you can't do it yourself, who do Sunday dinners are a tradition, not a formality. Now I didn't know if my parents still had their car, or if Emma had finally come to their rescue. I didn't know if they were still hosting their soirees full of deliberate brilliance and self-admiration, or if they were sitting in unhappy silence discussing how I, their eldest daughter, turned out to be so ungrateful. I didn't check their social media, I didn't ask mutual friends about them, I didn't drive past their house when I was in those areas. But what I did know was that Lucas had never asked about them since that day. Children feel it. They understand who truly loves them, without words, without explanations. And he had a family that would never make him doubt it. He had grandparents who did not miss any of his school activities, an aunt who built fortresses out of blankets with him, and a mother who finally realized that love should have no conditions. Last week, Lucas brought home a school project, a family tree that he proudly drew himself. "Mommy, look." I took the paper and saw that next to me he had drawn Tom and Sarah, Jenny and Max, and a little to the side, on a separate branch, his father. Mike and I maintained friendly relations. He and Lucas had regular video calls, rare but sincere meetings on holidays, and I never interfered with their time together. But my parents and Emma weren't in this picture at all. "Is that okay, Mommy?" "What is it?" he asked, looking into my face. Miss Johnson said that there are usually more people in family trees, but I told her that these are the only ones we need. I felt my throat constrict and smiled, putting my arm around his shoulders. It's perfect, kid. Absolutely perfect. I hung his drawing on the refrigerator, next to a photo from his last birthday, where we were all standing around a cake, laughing, hugging each other, where there were no forced smiles, obligations, awkwardness, only happiness, so simple and real. Sometimes the family you were born into is not the family you were meant to be in. Sometimes you have to let go of people who were supposed to love you to make room for those who really love you. It took me 32 years to understand this lesson. But watching Lucas grow up surrounded by true, unconditional love, I would say that the wait was worth it.